Jess? You're still waking up, I see. My name is Josefina Mora Chung. I'm the director of organizing for La Resistencia. I was supposed to be accompanied by our executive director, Rufina Reyes. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it today. I'm here today to talk a little bit about what it is that Jose experienced inside and what so many other people are experiencing as we are sitting here. The detention center has a capacity for about 1,575 people officially, but we believe there's a little bit more than that. Nationally, we've seen the numbers of people in detention and immigrant detention balloon over the past 2 years. I believe right now the numbers are about 65,000 people nationally that are in physical detention centers. And so I send out my warmest, heartfelt thanks to Jose's family for sharing their story, and that he is not alone, as well as the other 65,000 people that are continue being in detention as well. We could go to the next slide. So, sorry, the formatting didn't translate, I think, once I converted it. So who is La Resistencia? La Resistencia is an organization that was founded by people who were undocumented and actually impacted by the immigration system in one way or another. We've been collaborating and supporting people in detention in the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, as well as working to shut down the detention center and end all deportations and detentions in Washington. We've been doing this work for almost 12 years now. 12 years will be in March, our anniversary. And we formed because over 1,000 people in 2014 who were detained started a hunger strike, the largest hunger strike in an immigrant detention facility at the time. And they called our founder, Maru Mora, who then received the request that the people on strike wanted us to uplift their message and share their demands with the media. And so that's how La Resistencia started, was at the request of people in detention. And so people in detention are always our leadership, as well as people who are their families, people that have been impacted by this detention system. Go to the next slide. So some of our work entails not only collaborating and communicating daily with people in detention through our 3 phone lines that we have, which people can call. We use the communications to be able to document and expose the conditions that are happening inside the detention center. We also want to use our platform to uplift the voices of people that are in detention. We do not speak for them. We will never question them. We will never, try to edit their words, because ICE and GEO are the ones who question them every single day that they're in detention. So we always want to use our power to uplift their voices instead of us speaking for them. We also observe and document the conditions of the deportation flights that happen out of King County Airport in Seattle. We were the leading organization that was able to pressure the flights to end temporarily in 2019 out of Seattle, and they moved to Yakima. However, the federal government said, you can't do that. And so unfortunately, they resumed in 2023. So we have been the organization that has been leading observations with volunteers at the airport and being able to document the exact numbers of people that are being moved in and out of the airport. Lastly, we continuously find ways to make GEO and ICE's job harder here in Washington State. One of those ways is by collaborating with Representative Lillian Ortiz-Self, who spoke just a little bit ago. She has been an incredible ally for us in passing many different state measures, including HB 1470, which mandates that the Department of Health of Washington be able to go in and inspect the detention center. Because as of a couple years ago, that was not actually the case. The Department of Health could not go and inspect the detention center. Although it's a private business, like any other private business should be subject to inspection, but it was not. They somehow got around that. So Lillian Ortiz Self helped us draft that bill, and now it is law, although the Department of Health still has not been allowed in, and it's still in the courts today, a couple years later. We could go to the next slide. This graphic is a little bit old. It's from 2018, but and I'm not going to go over it in detail just because of time's sake. However, the detention center has been around for 20 years. It opened officially in 2004. This detention center has been expanded 2 times in previous history. And something really important to note about this particular detention center is that it's the regional detention center for the Northwest. So we also have a lot of families from Oregon, as well as Idaho and Montana that are detained in this facility. Something that I want to draw back to Jose's story that we heard a little bit earlier is that ICE really thrives off of people being able to be in isolation. So even though this detention center is our regional detention center, actually a big percentage of our people in detention here are not from Washington. They will consistently move people around when they are detained in order to be able to isolate people from their family. I don't know if folks know that in immigrant detention there are solitary confinement units, and solitary confinement is something that is used quite often for retaliation, especially when someone is complaining, filing grievances, or organizing hunger strikes, or organizing in their units to bring complaints to ICE and GEO's attention. So our regional detention center is owned and operated by a private company called GEO Group. ICE is actually very rarely on the premises. ICE is the folks who make the decisions about the immigration case. But the people that clean, the people that are the guards, the people that make decisions on whether someone can go to see a medical provider, that's all on GEO. That is not any ICE involvement in those decisions. One last thing I would like to point out about this particular graphic is that if you see on the top right, there are some big vultures. This is a private system. Before 9/11, there wasn't a Department of Homeland Security, and there wasn't an Immigration Customs Enforcement. After 9/11, with the signing of the Patriot Act, we saw a huge opportunity to make money off of people's detention, and we see the increase of criminalization of immigrants. The way that you can see this pretty plainly is not only that companies like GEO are paid per person per night that they stay in a detention center by ICE, but in addition that there are many different companies that contract with ICE to make money off of simple things like being able to call or message your family members. That costs money. Being able to purchase instant soup or a canned soup or a juice from the commissary, that's going to cost money. Even things as simple as being able to send like an email message to your family, that's going to cost money, each single message that you send. So here we see that there are many different private interests in detention, and why we see that, especially under a president who is a businessman, he and his friends see the monetary interest in keeping people in detention. We go to the next slide. So, La Resistencia's main work is around exposing the conditions of the detention center. La Resistencia really values being able to work with any person who's in detention. It doesn't matter their history, doesn't matter where they come from. We're going to trust them and their stories because, as I mentioned, they're always questioned by ICE. We have heard throughout our being as an organization, that the biggest complaint has always been around food. The food is inedible, the portions are small, there is foreign objects in the food. The picture on the far left is actually just from a month ago, where people in a unit reported that there was rat feces in their food. Geo claimed that it was burnt rice, but I don't know, that doesn't really look like burnt rice to me. There's also many complaints about medical neglect that happen in the detention center. Here in the middle, you can see a leg. That is the leg of Rogelio Maldonado Rosas, who has diabetes and needs kidney dialysis. And he was showing us that his legs are irritated because every time he has to have his dialysis appointment, his ankles are shackled. We also have a picture of a neck. You can't really see it very well, but there's like an injury there. It's a little swollen from when a guard had attacked a man inside a solitary confinement unit. And lastly, on the far right, you can see that there is a drone picture. And I don't know if folks remember, I think it was last year, there was a facility in Texas where people in detention also did SOS with their own bodies. And that happened here in Tacoma in 2020 when there was no COVID regulations for people there. So there's always been organizing inside this particular facility. We go to the next slide. Lastly, I mentioned we uplift the stories of people in detention. We have a campaign called Free Them All, in which we work with every person in detention who would like to have their story published. And we take a statement, we work with an artist to release a portrait, and we do a community petition to be able to have people use it for their court cases or potentially for other cases that they might have. And sometimes it's really just uplifting for people to know they have community out there that want to support their release. Again, we work with any person no matter what their background is. There are many people who are in detention that come from prison. They come from the Department of Corrections. And it's important to note that Keep Washington Working has one loophole, and that's that Department of Corrections can collaborate with ICE. Even though people have already completed their sentence and done their duties for their crimes, they are then essentially have double jeopardy, in which they are serving a second sentence in ICE detention. One last thing that I think is really important to draw back to Josef's family's story that they were sharing earlier. The horrors that we're witnessing on a national level out in the street are just a pinnacle of what has been happening behind closed doors for decades at this point. And so it's really critical that when you are thinking about how you want to support people in detention, La Resistencia always encourages people to support everyone that's in detention and to support the work that has been happening on the ground for over 12 years now. These are some of the stories that we've highlighted just in the past year. You can find these and more petitions on our website, laresistencianw.org. And we have many other upcoming events and actions that people can take. Even just signing a petition or being able to share one of our calls to action is a huge help in people in detention knowing that they're not alone and that there are people who are outside who care for them and want them to be released. We'll go to the last slide. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for all the wonderful work that you guys are doing, highlighting the stories. Any questions that we have from our audience? Any questions?
No staff local, or are they?
That's a good question. So Geo is an international company, but everyone that they hire in their localities are local people. So they are community members, and we always say that people need work, That's very true. It's unfortunate that people pick work like guarding the detention center, but they are usually local folks, and we focus more on the company as a whole. Although the workers have been increasingly aggressive towards us at our actions outside of the detention center.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so we are funded solely by private grants, by foundations, and also individual donations. So yeah, you can find the link to donate on our website. Yeah, and
Yo tengo una pregunta, o sea, ¿qué se puede hacer viendo tanta ingratitud que está pasando? ¿Qué otra cosa se puede hacer para que no esté pasando eso? Estamos viendo todos y sabemos todos que está contra todo el mundo este presidente. ¿Qué se puede hacer para componer esto? Porque esto ya basta, es una guerra con todos. Gracias.
I can answer bilingual. Yeah, I can do it. Yeah, so I'll do it. Lo hago primero en español para que el señor me pueda entender. Muchas gracias por su... Yeah, I'll do both. Muchas gracias por su pregunta. Pues sí, mira, ahorita, como han dicho, nadie está seguro de ICE, de siendo atacados por ICE. O sea, en el caso, ni físicamente, ¿verdad? Ahorita lo que nosotros estamos diciendo es que primero hay que estar informados, tener los recursos de cómo verificar actividad de ICE en las calles. Y por último, estar informados de cómo es que pasa el proceso de detención, porque mucha gente se pone muy confuso o pues se ponen muy estresados, que pues tienen toda la razón, pero el proceso es muy lento. Entonces, unidos y empezando a hablar de estos en sus vecindades, en sus comunidades, creando redes de apoyo, es la mejor manera de empezar a protegerse de estos ataques que están pasando. Y por último, es involucrarse en trabajo organizativo como la resistencia, que estamos apoyando a gente dentro de detención y peleando en otras maneras para cerrar el centro de detención, para que ya nadie esté detenido en el estado de Washington. So what I was saying is that it's really important for one to be informed about what it is, how ICE attacks can happen, both in people's cases, but in addition, attacks that just happen physically on the street, as we saw in the Señor José's case. The other piece is to be informed about what it is that happens when someone is detained. As was mentioned earlier, it's a slow process. People end up very anxious and desperate to be able to locate their family members, and they have every right to be. But it's an incredibly slow process. And so being able to create networks and be able to talk about it in your neighborhoods, in your communities, about how this process works will allow for people to be able to support each other and create a more defensive network for if someone in your community is taken. Lastly, it's really important to know that, again, work like this has been happening for over a decade, and being able to strengthen that work, not only to support people in detention, but to shut down the detention center and end detention of immigrants in Washington state will be our best bet.
Any other questions?
I was just curious what kind of retaliation you've seen from people who have detention. Mental work.
Yeah, retaliation is extremely common in the Northwest Detention Center. Most commonly, we see retaliation when people either file a lot of grievances against like an officer or a situation that happened, as well as when people go on hunger strike. The immediate first retaliation that we see is that people are put into isolation, into solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is incredibly damaging psychologically. There's a lot of research around it. And there's also research done by the UW Center of Human Rights that has documented that the Northwest Detention Center is the facility in the nation that has used solitary confinement the longest. And it actually led to 2 people passing away in 2024 who were both in solitary confinement. That's always the first step. The second step is usually some kind of physical retaliation as well. We have had many documented cases not only of physical abuse, people being punched or kicked or slapped in the face, but in addition, we've also seen documented cases of sexual abuse as well. And the UW Center of Human Rights has also published studies around that. The other piece that I think is really important around hunger strikes is that people are often still tricked into trying to eat again, so they will either put food in front of them, way more portions than usual, or they'll actually, and there has been documented cases of force feeding through a tube in people's noses. And that usually requires a court order, and it has been documented across the country and only one time here in Washington State. Those are the most common forms of retaliation that we've seen. Also, people's communication being limited. They use tablets inside of the detention center, and they'll take away the tablets and limit their usage of them. They also will limit how much time they can go outside into this empty courtyard. That's their rec time. And then in addition, people have complained that lately there's been a lot of restrictions around their spiritual services, like mass, seeing faith leaders, all those things that kind of keep people grounded because there are no activities or programs in the detention center because it's a civil detention center, not one run by the Department of Corrections.
Any other questions?
First, thank you so much. As you know how. So, to you. The question is, I expect that you answer as many of us are trying to be. Well, services or service our community do also react. What would you say is the best way? On the ground as well. So you have to answer us do suggest the best communicate so that say us work support each other because I think this is a time to form alliances, to work together, not to work, even though it's hard. Sometimes small nonprofits and busy trying. So just maybe suggestions, and the answers just some suggestions.
Thank you. That come to mind. We collaborate with many different organizations, both across Washington as well as the Pacific Northwest, primarily because people really rely on us to be able to provide information when a loved one is in detention. So we're always happy to collaborate with your local organization, get to know you and the population that you serve, and be a resource if someone in your membership or community has been detained. The other thing is that we actually ask partners to be able to come to the detention center and host what we call a Solidarity Day, which is just a rally outside of the detention center. I know it can be really scary, but as I mentioned, ICE is actually not usually on the premises. La Resistencia has been thinking a lot about security and safety for our own leadership as well. And it's a really good opportunity for members and community members to learn about what is a detention center like and what should they expect if they ever have a loved one in detention and have to go visit. So we are there approximately once a month. Our next Solidarity Day will be on the 21st, and it's actually in partnership with an organization called Sudu for Solidarity. Earlier it was talked about how this is really history repeating itself, right? And Sudu for Solidarity is a group of Japanese Americans who are descendants and survivors of World War II incarceration. and they've been working alongside us to help push the shutdown of the detention center. So they'll be hosting the Solidarity Day on the 21st, that's a Saturday, at 1 p.m. And if your organization or local group wants to host a Solidarity Day too, feel free to reach out to us. There is a general email on our website, or you can come find me and I'll give you my email as well. Those are some immediate ways that we can work together.
Thank you. Any other questions? We are, we have one time for one more question, and before I pass that, I wanted to tell you what's next, so you guys know, because we're gonna wrap up in here after the next question. We're having the march. The march will happen starting at 5. So we asking you that as you're marching, if you see anything that you're concerned or there are any kind of emergency, we have many people who are wearing a vest. I'll tell you, it's color, wearing an orange vest, and also they have a red bandera. So if it's an emergency, we're asking you to please go to that person. And for the people who only speak Spanish, si en algún momento ven algo que les preocupa, cualquier tipo de emergencia, cuando estamos marchando hacia el Capitolio, pedimos que por favor se comuniquen con las personas que llevan un chaleco naranja y que tienen un pañuelo rojo. Vamos a tener algunos, lo que llamamos nosotros pitos de emergencia, y ellos van a hacer el caso cualquier cosa. No estamos esperando nada, pero solamente el caso de alguna emergencia. You can have one more question?
That's okay.